For 150 years, the world was sold a massive myth. We were told that an orphan teenager by the name of Jack Daniels learned how to make whiskey from a white country preacher. We used that folksy recipe to build the most famous liquor brand on the planet. That's a lie. Jack Daniels didn't invent his own whiskey. He learned the science from an enslaved man by the name of Nearest Green. This is not a feel-good story about a lucky recipe. It's a story of stolen credit and how a black man used generational knowledge to build a global empire. This is the story of Nearest Green. And this is One My Black History. I'm your host, Country Boy. Join me in my Substack. But without further ado, let's get started. To understand what happened, you have to look at the reality of the 1850s. We're in Lynchburg, Tennessee, on a 313-acre farm owned by a white preacher and businessman by the name of Dan Call. Dan Call owned his own whiskey still, but he was a busy man. He was preaching on Sundays and running a local store. He did not have time to sit over boiling vats of corn mash. The man that was actually running his liquor operation, the man doing the grueling labor, was an enslaved man by the name of Nearest Green. White society looked at enslaved people as farm equipment, as a cow, as a plow. But running a whiskey still required the precision of a chemist. Nearest wasn't just dumping corn in a wooden barrel. He was operating a volatile system of fire, boiling liquids. One mistake of the temperature and the entire still could explode. One miscalculation of the fermentation time and the entire batch is poison. Nearest had to understand the exact ratios of corn to rye to malted barley. He mastered it. Under Nearest Green's daily management, Dan Call still became known for producing the best whiskey in the county. But Nearest Green's real genius wasn't just making whiskey. It's how he finished it. He used a highly specific filtration method that would later become known as the Lincoln County process. When raw whiskey comes out of the still, it's harsh, it burns. To make it smooth, it has to be filtered. Nearest took sugar maple wood or burned it down on open fires till it was hard charcoal, and he slowly filtered that raw alcohol drop by drop through the charcoal. He stripped out the bitter oils and left an incredibly smooth, sweet whiskey. But Nearest didn't invent this out of thin air. He tapped into a long line of Black history. For generations, the people of Western Africa used charcoal to filter and purify their drinking water. When millions of Black folks were forced onto slave ships and brought to the Americas, they brought their knowledge with them. Enslaved people used charcoal to purify their water in the brutal conditions of the American South. And eventually, men like Nearest Green applied that exact science to make it liquor. Nearest was one of the first to perfect this method for commercial whiskey. That specific charcoal filtration is the exact reason Jack Daniels tastes different from Kentucky bourbon today. It was African survival applied to a cash crop. So, in the 1850s, an orphan white teenager by the name of Jack Daniels came to work at the Dan Call farm. He wanted to learn the whiskey trade. Dan Call didn't teach him. He pointed directly at the enslaved master distiller. Call told Jack, "Nearest is the best whiskey maker I know of." Nearest took Jack Daniels under his wing. He taught Jack the exact sugar maple filtration method. He taught him the timing, the temperature, and the science required to make the whiskey that the entire county was buying. But stop and look at what's happening here. You got a master distiller who holds the secret to a highly valuable product. But because he is legally classified as property, he can't own the land, the steel, or the business. He can't even put his name on the bottle. He's forced by law to hand over his methods to a white teenager who has the legal right to make money off of it. But this is where the situation changes, because Nearest Green didn't just fade into the background. In 1865, when the Civil War ends and the 13th Amendment is ratified, Nearest Green was legally a free man, and he walked away from the stills forever. A year later, in 1866, Jack Daniels takes that exact process that Nearest had taught him and officially opens Jack Daniels Distillery. He has the land and the financial backing, but he has a problem. He needs someone to run the enterprise. Jack Daniels didn't hire a white man. He hired Nearest Green. Nearest becomes the first black master distiller in American history. And he's no longer working for free. He takes a cash salary for running the operation that he helped build, but he doesn't stop there. He brings in his son, George and Eli, into the business, and they bring in their grandsons. You have to understand, at the time, black Americans were being forced back onto plantations with sharecropping, but the Green family held the keys to the most profitable business in the county. But I can show you better than I can tell you, because they left us proof. Sometime in the late 1800s, Jack Daniels gathers his entire crew for an unofficial company photo. Now, you need to understand the social rules of the Jim Crow South to understand how crazy this photo is. In the late 19th century, racial rules were absolute. If a black man was allowed in a white photograph, he was strictly in the back or cropped out of the photo entirely. But if you look at the Jack Daniels photo, Jack Daniels is sitting off to the side, but dead center of the photo, sitting in a chair, in the spot of honor, is a black man. That is George Green, Nearest Green's son. You don't put a black man front and center of a white photograph in the 1800s in the Jim Crow South unless he is the absolute backbone of your enterprise. Jack Daniels knew that without the Green family knowledge and daily labor, there was no product. However, when Jack Daniels died, the establishment does what the establishment does. They sanitized their history to make it comfortable for white buyers. Over the century, their marketing machine erased Nearest Green. They told the myth of the white preacher, teaching the young Jack Daniels how to make whiskey. And it was printed in books and sold to tourists, and they sold millions of bottles and completely wrote black folks out of the story. And it stayed that way until 2016, when an author named Fawn Weaver heard about a rumor about a black man teaching Jack Daniels how to make whiskey. She went down to Lynchburg, Tennessee, and she bought the actual 313-acre farm. She spent hours digging through local census records, property deeds, and tax documents, and she interviewed the descendants on both sides of the families. She pulled historical receipts and proved that he was the one who actually engineered Jack Daniels. Weaver took her mountain of evidence and forced an entire global corporation to update their official history. Because of her work, Jack Daniels Distillery had to admit to the world that their entire global enterprise relied on the brains of a black man. In the end, we are constantly told that black history is just a long timeline of suffering. They want you to believe that your ancestors were nothing but dumb, unskilled labor, waiting for the white world to show them mercy. The story of Nearest Green destroys that lie. He was trapped in a brutal system, but instead of breaking, he used his ancestral knowledge to master the chemistry to build something that the world had never seen before. He built the foundation of a global brand. He survived the Civil War, and the moment he was free, he forced the world to pay him for his knowledge. The establishment did steal the credit, and they hid it for 150 years, but you cannot erase his blueprint. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy. This has been the story of Nearest Green. I thought this was dope. This is one of my favorites. I've been thinking about doing this for a while, and I'm super proud of how it came out. Hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'd like to thank all my financial contributors, every single one of you guys. You guys are amazing. I tell this joke about John S. Johnson because he had to pawn his mother's furniture so they could start Ebony and Jet in like 1941. And I'd like to thank you guys helped me build this so that I don't have to pawn my mama's furniture. Anyway, she wouldn't allow me to do that either. She put her hands on me. Thank you guys for your support. I love you guys. Peace.